Hello! Welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie and today I have a special episode for you. I am doing a roundup of all the ranunculus sweaters I have knit so far. So maybe a bouquet of ranunculi? This is a pattern by Midori Hirose and I have knit 5 of them so far, and I have ideas for further variations that I will knit up in the future. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview of the pattern basics. It is a paid for pattern, so I won't be going into super detail, definitely not stitch counts or anything like that, but I will give you an overview about construction and maybe a little history about this pattern, and then go into each of the ones that I have made so far. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to change in and out of each one yet, because it's just kind of annoying to do that, and they have different purposes or how I plan to wear them, although not entirely, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I will be showing photos on the screen of me wearing these different sweaters so that you can at least see how I have at least styled them and how it fits on me. And I have knit the same size for all of them, but my gauge has changed slightly, and I've used different yarns for each one. So the fabric's slightly different and the look is slightly different. I've done different lengths as far as the body goes. Some have shaping, some don't. Some have long sleeves, some are short sleeves. So I've done a variety of different things, and I thought I would share those variations with you, as well as some tips and how I decided on my yarn choices for the pattern. And yeah, so let's get started. So let's start with an overview of the pattern. I'm going to have a screenshot from the Ravelry page of Midori Hirose on the side here, so you can see what the details are there. So this pattern was first published in June of 2017, and it was published as one size. I did not purchase the pattern at that time, so I cannot compare what the current pattern is like to the original pattern. However, looking at the sample images on the pattern page, the fit is very different. It is one size only, and so there was a lot of ease for someone who may be much smaller wearing that same sweater versus somebody bigger wearing that same sweater. And so the fit on each body would be different because the sweater was only in one size. The pattern then I didn't really gravitate towards because I just didn't really like the fit of it, and it just wasn't my style. And of course, it coming in only one size made it not very size inclusive and not very shape inclusive, and it just didn't really make sense to me to be done in one size. So then it was republished several years later with multiple sizes. I believe there are 11 sizes available now, and so that is when I purchased the pattern, and I had seen multiple other people make it after it was re-released, and I thought, okay, that is something that I can support and work with, and so that's why I purchased the pattern then. The pattern gauge is at 14 stitches by 20 rounds in 4 inches of stockinette stitch after blocking, and the recommended needle size is a US 10, which is 6 millimeters. Now, depending on how you want to modify your sweater, you could go down in size for the ribbing, you could not do ribbing, there's so many different ways you can modify it to make it your own. And because the gauge is at 14 stitches, it also gives a little wiggle room for you to change up your fabric density if you want. And you can do that by altering the type of yarn you use, but also by altering the needle size to change that fabric gauge. If you want it to be denser, you could do 18 stitches. If you want it to be even looser, you could go down to 13 or 12 stitches for 4 inches. It's really up to you. And so even in the pattern, it will say, choose the type of yarn that you want for whatever you want. And you can also add more length in the front with bust darts. There are links and instructions for that if that's something you wanted to do. And the sleeve lengths, there are 2 different sleeve lengths written for in the pattern, and there are 2 different necklines, I believe, also written in the pattern. The reason I'm not entirely sure is because I've done a lot of these things just kind of on my own and done what I wanted, so I didn't exactly follow the pattern for those things. But if you wanted to follow the pattern, there are options written in the pattern for you to do that. It is a top-down round yoke pullover. There are also raglan increases in the yoke to help get a better fit, which I actually really like. There are these lace and textured stitches across the top, which give it a beautiful layered necklace look. The stitches are not complicated to do, and there are tons of video tutorials included if that's something you needed. I will say that I did not use any of the video tutorials, so I cannot comment on how they are. The finished circumference comes in 46 as the smallest circumference, 46 inches, up to almost 71 inches. I think it's 70.75 inches, and all the numbers in between. And so again, you can adjust that as you need to, as you want to. There are yardages for yarn also given, but again, if you change anything, that's going to change your yardage. I think that's the basic overview of everything that I have to say about the pattern. So let's get to the ones that I have made. The first one I made was in May of 2022. Here is the front. And this one I used a size 1. I did change my needle size for the ribbing. So the main fabric I used a US 10 or 6mm, and for the sleeve cuffs and for the body hem I used an US 8, which is a 5mm needle, and my gauge was at 16 stitches by 24 rounds instead of what is written in the pattern. So my fabric density was a little bit different, even though I used the recommended needle size, and that was fine by me. I used a La Bien Aimée Merino Singles yarn that at the time I had bought for my birthday, and I had 200 grams of it, and they were singles, and so I just wanted to use them completely up. If I have a photo of what the yarn looked like before it was marled together, I will show it here on the screen, but I held the singles double, and I used up every last inch of the yarn. I had 107 grams of the Water Lilies colorway and 106 grams of the Andromeda colorway, and I used it up completely. It is a very speckly yarn, pastel lavender with some mint, a little bit of hot pink, and fuchsia. And I just love the way the colors marled together. I think it gave it a very even speckling. And so for this one, let's see, what did I do? I did a little bit of waist shaping at the bottom because I knew I was going to run out of yarn, which meant I didn't want it super boxy right at my natural waist. So I did decreases along the edge, along the two sides to bring it in a little bit. So on the decrease rounds, it would have gone down 4 stitches, which would be 1 inch. So every so often I would decrease 2 stitches on each side, and it would subtract 1 inch as it kept going down, which worked out really well because then I could use up more yarn and have a little more length as I kept going down. My sleeves here, I think I just picked up and did ribbing right away, and it worked out just fine. For my bind offs, I always go a needle or 2 bigger than what I did my ribbing in to make sure it is stretchy enough, but otherwise I will just bind off in pattern. So here's a close-up of the sleeve and a close-up of the yoke. So I think because of the speckling and how soft the yarn is, even though I do get the texture, it isn't as pronounced as you will see in some of the other ones that I knit. But I really like this one. I think it goes nicely over a lightweight linen dress underneath, or if I'm going to be wearing like a loose tank top underneath with jeans, that works out really well. On to the second one. This one I also knit the size 1. I think I followed most of the instructions on this one as well, and I had this pretty dark and light green, and I wanted to hold this yarn double as well because I wanted to avoid any pooling of darker or lighter sections. So this is the Yarn Collective Fleurville 4-ply. It's 100% superwash merino, and it is a heavier fingering weight yarn, I believe. Let me just double check here. I have my notes in front of me. Yes, it is 382 yards for 100 grams. And I used 326 grams total. And I did my Old Norwegian cast on for the top with the main fabric needles. Then I just continued following the pattern as written. I did make the body length longer than it says in the pattern. And I did do a little bit of waist shaping once again. I think I only brought in this circumference by about 2 inches though, compared to the previous one. So then my final body circumference at my hips still gave me 4 inches of positive ease because I did not want it to be tight around my hips, but I did want it to go to my hip bone, which is about here, or a little bit past it. So I have 10 inches of body before the hem, and then I knit my hem, I think 2 or 3 inches. And then for my sleeves, I modified this one to be elbow length. And you know what? I don't have photos of me wearing this one on my project page, so let me just throw it on real quick. I will be right back. So here we are. This is my second one, and it's definitely darker and moodier. The sleeves hit right above my elbow so that when I bend them, I don't get a weird crease there. It goes past my hip bones. The hem probably starts right at the top of my hip bones. And because it is a little bit darker with the dark and light yarn, the textured yoke isn't as pronounced. However, the subtlety is there, and I still really like that it gives it a little bit of something interesting up at the yoke section. The neckline is not too close or too wide, and it is something that I can still wear over something if I wanted to layer it, but it is also super comfortable, just worn as is. I guess since I had to take that one off anyway to put on the one I was wearing before, I figured I would just put on the next one. So this is my third ranunculus, and this one I did do a little bit differently. So I did still cast on for the size 1, and my main fabric here is a US 9 5.5 millimeter needle, and then actually I didn't do a ribbing for the cuff here. This I followed the pattern, which was really neat. It was a fun technique to do. And then the ribbing on my body hem section, I used a US 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter needle. This one I knit at a gauge of 16 stitches by 20 rounds. And the yarn I used here is Purl Soho's Morning Base, which is a cotton and yak blend. And I used a total of 390 grams. And this yarn comes in 191 yards for 100 grams. And it is classified as DK weight. So I wanted to have something that was machine washable, but also something that I could wear in the summer, in the spring, when it was still cool. I wanted a neutral color that I could really throw on with anything, and this was it for me. I wanted it long, so I actually initially knit it much shorter than this, but I felt like it was restricting my movement because I felt like I could not put my arms up without my sweater riding up, and I didn't necessarily want to have to wear a tank top underneath. And so given this warmer weather friendly fiber, I did not want to have to wear another layer and defeat the purpose of me feeling cooler wearing this. And so having it too short just meant I would then feel like I have to wear a layer underneath, and I didn't want to do that. So long story short, I ripped back and re-knit it. And made the body much longer before starting the hem, made the hem a little shorter, and I'm so much happier with it now, and I'm so happy that I went back and changed it. So this, let's see, what else did I have to... The reason I went down a needle size from the US 10 was because I felt like the yarn, the fabric was too gapey on a US 10. Being a cotton or mostly cotton yarn, there isn't the fuzz or the halo from wool yarn to fill in those gaps. So it just ended up being too loose looking for me. And so I went down in needle size, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. I didn't do any shaping for the sleeves. I wanted to go somewhere between 3/4 length and bracelet length. I think it came out to be right at 3/4 length. My body length ended up being about 14 inches from the underarm all the way to the bind off. And on me, I find that to be a really good full length for a sweater. Of course, it depends on how deep this yoke section is, but I feel like in general, 12 to 14 inches on me is a good full length to knit from the underarm to the bottom, or I guess if I was knitting a bottom up, from the bottom to the underarm section. In any case, this portion here, if it's 12 to 14 inches, that's closer to full length on me, again, depending on how the yoke depth is. So I changed into the next one and realized I forgot to mention something. Something I did very different on this one is that I omitted the short rows in the front. So the pattern has it written where there are short rows in the front and the back, and that creates more of a boat neck shape, and I didn't want that. So I just omitted the short rows in the front, I did the back ones, and then I just went right into the yoke, and it was very easy to do and didn't really mess up anything. In fact, then I had a little more of a crew neck instead of a boat neck, and that is exactly what I wanted. So that brings me to my next one that I have changed into. And this one I wanted for sure to be a summer weight ranunculus. And I cast on size 1 again. I changed my needle size because I changed my yarn. This one is knit using Pearl Soho Santolina. It is the green agave color, and this yarn comes in 328 yards for 100 grams. It's classified as fingering weight, and it's 70% cotton, 20% rayon from bamboo, and 10% hemp. And I did not find it to hurt my hands. I found it really enjoyable to knit with. The needle sizes I used were a US 8 for the main fabric and a US 6 for the body and sleeve ribbing. That's the word, ribbing. And I used a total of 194 grams. And again, I did not do the short row shaping in the front, especially with warm weather knits. I do not like anything really close to my neck. So I omitted the short rows in the front. I still did the short rows in the back. And then because my gauge is different, I believe I did a few extra rows in the back for the short rows to account for my difference in gauge. So let's say I still wanted an inch higher in the back, well then I need to adjust for that and knit a few extra rows of short rows to get to that inch. I did do my yoke depth. I had to increase the number of rounds I did for that to get to my desired yoke depth, again because my gauge was different. This one was at 18 stitches by 24 rows. And then my sleeve circumference, I adjusted the number of stitches I had in my sleeves, again because of my gauge difference. I did not want negative ease in my sleeve. I do not find negative ease to be comfortable if I want something loose and airy, so I added an additional number of stitches in the underarm cast on stitches to increase my sleeve circumference. And that also increased my body stitches. It increased my body stitches because it would be in the underarm. And then my final chest circumference ended up being 39 inches, which gives me 7 inches of positive ease. It is nice and loose. I again did elbow length sleeves. Actually, these are higher than elbow length, so I don't know what you call these sleeves, just regular short sleeves. But I did pick up, I did knit 30 rounds, and then I went into my ribbing. And this one I also ended up knitting a longer body so that I could wear it in the summer with like high-waisted pants that I could tuck in, like linen pants that I can tuck in very easily, or shorts. And if I raise my arm, it is not going to be halfway up my torso. And so it's something that I can very easily move around in and feel comfortable in. And it is something that I wore quite a bit in the summer after I finished it, and it's something that's machine washable and machine dryable. I don't think I put it in the dryer this summer though. I think I definitely machine washed because in the summer there's sweat, there's sand, there's sunscreen. And so I did throw it in the washing machine, but I think I just laid it flat to dry afterwards. But it dries pretty quickly. So this is something that I really wanted to have. I wanted a summer version, and I could see myself doing another summer version. But basically I chose this fiber for this yarn, the fiber content for this yarn, because I didn't want any wool. I did not want any prickle. I know people say that wool is magical and it regulates your body temperature, but honestly, as soon as I start sweating or feeling hot, it prickles. And I just, if I have the option to, I'm not going to wear wool when it's really hot. So I wanted a yarn that had no wool content in it, so cotton, bamboo, and hemp worked really well for this version. Okay, back to the one that I was wearing before we changed into a whole bunch of them that I said I wasn't going to change into. But this is my fifth one, and my inspiration for this fifth one was winter. I wanted a winter version of the ranunculus. I wanted that comforting sigh. I wanted something that would remind me of hot tea, hot coffee, that first sip of hot tea or hot coffee in the morning when the sky is just waking up and you feel that chill in the air and you just want to cozy up and do nothing, which is never true. You're never really doing nothing, but anyway, beside the point. That's my inspiration for this one. I knit this one in the Purl Soho Yonder base, and this one is an Aran weight yarn. It comes at 140 yards for 100 grams. This comes in 50% Highland wool, 50% alpaca. There are 3 strands plied together in a lofty spin, and it is very plump and very round. And I feel like what is really nice about this yarn is because it's so round, there's great stitch definition. And because it's a lightly heathered yarn but mostly one color, you also don't have as many distractions as far as anything that would pull away from the texture of the yoke. And so for this pattern especially, I think if you want that texture to really shine, I recommend choosing a yarn that is more solid. Now, if you don't, that's totally okay too. I have a speckled one, I have a highly variegated tonal one, and those are both lovely, but the texture definitely doesn't stick out as much. And also, if it is a rounder yarn, again, that texture will stick out a lot more and just be more pronounced. This colorway is Smoky Mauve, and it is a lavender toned gray. I had mentioned that there's some heathering in it, so it's very subtle color shifts. And I think this is something that depending on what color you are wearing it with, it will lean more gray or lean warmer or lean cooler. And for this one, I used a US 9, 5.5 millimeter, and for the sleeve and body ribbing, I used US 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter. My gauge on this one was 15 stitches by 21 rounds, and I used a total of 556 grams. I really like this one. This is exactly what I wanted for a winter ranunculus. It is slightly heavier, it is drapey. I wanted something with full length sleeves. I have longer arms compared to what size I would typically pick for a body or chest circumference, and so I'm always knitting my sleeves longer. And so when you make your own sweaters, you can knit your sleeves to whatever length you want. And so this one, I wanted it to cover my wrist when my arms hang down, but not be bothersome when I am writing or doing other things. And so my body length here is also full length. I wanted it to be 14 inches from the underarm to the bind off. And I haven't remeasured it since washing, but I think it's probably somewhere around there, maybe even slightly longer than that. My high hip bone is here, and it's a good maybe 4 inches or so past that. And it is very drapey. There are no gaping holes, and it's very easy to wear without an underlayer underneath, but if I wanted to, I could easily put a t-shirt underneath. Right now I have a tank top underneath. I could still put a plaid flannel underneath because of all of the ease that I have here, and it wouldn't be bunchy at all. I have worn this underneath a winter coat and haven't had any issues with that either because the yoke depth isn't so deep that it would push everything up if I was putting it in the sleeves of a winter coat. And so this is absolutely what I wanted, and I am so pleased with it, and this is my most recent finished one, and I have ideas for future ones. we'll just see when I get there. So I think that is all I have to share with you today. I hope you did gain a little bit of insight into my thought process as I have been making all of these different ranunculus sweaters. This will definitely not be my last. I am very inspired by the seasons and nature around me, and so oftentimes I am making things that go with that season or go with a certain feeling, and that's where my inspiration comes from. So with that, cheers to being creative and happy knitting!